So good evening, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to be here for the 2017 rate adjustment hearing. Before we begin, I would like to thank everyone for their work in preparation for today's hearing. Department of Public Utilities Director Tracy Davies and Assistant Director Jonathan Lee, thank you both for being here tonight. I'd also like to thank Steve Gladman, who chairs the Sewer and Water Advisory Board, for attending to inform us of the 2017 utility rate adjustments. I'd also like to thank members of the public that may come down to City Hall and those tuning in from home to learn more about this process. Finally, would like to thank the city staff, John Oswalt, Stephanie Magus, and Kevin McCain from my office for their work in getting us prepared for this important hearing. I do wish to remind those members of the public who wish to speak to please fill out a speaker slip before the public testimony portion of the hearing. The purpose of the hearing is to review and comment on the proposed 2017 water and sewage rates for the City of Columbus. We'll also discuss the department's payment assistance program for low-income residents and seniors using the City of Columbus utilities. This hearing will be available to the public on the columbus.gov YouTube channel. It's currently streaming live online on the CTV website and broadcasting on Time Warner and WOW on Channel 3 and AT&T UVerse Channel 99. I will now turn it over to the director to introduce our presenters. Thank you all for being here, and thank you for taking the time.
Thank you, Chairman Stinziano. I appreciate the opportunity to review our proposed rate adjustment for 2017. As you mentioned, joining me here this evening are the Sewer and Water Advisory Board Chair, Steve Gladman, and Utilities Assistant Director, John Lee. But before we hear from those gentlemen, I just wanted to make a couple of comments about the Department of Public Utilities' proposed 2017 budget that you will be considering. The 2017 budget is a zero growth budget for the department. The department continues to focus spending on superior customer service for more than 1 million customers in Central Ohio, focusing on critical infrastructure improvements and retiring our debt. Our capital needs are driven by three main factors: regulatory compliance, system maintenance, and development needs that help us meet the demands of the growing region. We're currently improving all three of our water treatment plants. The upgrades will remove nitrates from the drinking water, improve taste and smell of our water, and prevent problems that some of other communities have experienced, most notably lead in the water system. We have increased spending for our water line replacement program, which has resulted in fewer leaks, more saved water, and better service to our residential business customers. All this while continuing to market our low-income and senior discount programs to thousands of eligible families and residents. Mr. Chairman, again, we thank you for holding this hearing, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you for that preview of the budget and for, again, all that you and your department continue to do for the residents and businesses of the City of Columbus. I don't know if next will be Mr. Gladman or Mr. Lee.
Mr. Gladman, I believe.
Thank you. And just for process, I will wait to ask questions till all three have presented. That way, whatever is best. But it looks like we're having technical difficulties as well.
I think we're fine now, Mr. Chairman. My name is Steve Gladman. I am the Suburban Community Representative to the Sewer and Water Advisory Board. I also serve on the Grandview Heights City Council, and I'm the current chair of the Sewer and Water Advisory Board. The board meets 4 times a year, and the first 2 meetings are briefings by the various divisions on the sort of challenges and opportunities they have within those divisions, and give us a very detailed overview of that. The third meeting, which is always my favorite, Auditor Dorian comes in and gives us the primer on public finance and all the bond status of the city and how that relates to proposals in the capital needs for the utilities department. The staff does a very good job of presenting us with a lot of information, very detailed and sophisticated capital needs assessment, operating needs assessment, and are really very willing to answer questions. We explore not only the financial aspects, but the programmatic aspects about customer delivery, billing. We talk about the low-income and senior discount program and always question how many people are participating, how can we increase participation, what are the barriers if there are any. Then on the fourth meeting, the department provides us with additional detail and justification for their proposed rate increases, and then we have a discussion about those, and the final thing is we make a recommendation. And I think the Sewer and Water Advisory Board and the administration, when we look at rate increases, we want the minimum rate increase that's required to sustain the integrity of the existing infrastructure and meet future capital needs. So I think everyone's very thoughtful of that, and they're very restrained in asking for increases. So with your permission, I will read our letter to you and to the President, to President Klein, that outlines the recommendation of the Sewer and Water Advisory Board, which are concurrent with the recommendations of staff. Members of the Sewer and Water Advisory Board met with representatives from the Department of Utilities 4 times in 2016 to review and discuss the operations and project planning activities of the water, sewer, and stormwater enterprises. At our September 28th meeting, we reviewed proposed water, sanitary sewer, and stormwater rates. The board approved the following rate recommendations effective January 1, 2017. For the fiscal year 2017, the board recommends an increase in sanitary sewer rates of 3%, water rates of 3%, and stormwater rates of 1%. When considered together, the bill impact on an average residential customer within the city of Columbus is 2.9%. Over the past few years, the board has not raised the TKN extra strength charges and regular extra strength charges per recommendations from our rate study. The board recommends no additional increases in 2017 to these charges. The board recommends continuing the surcharge within the sanitary sewer rates, known as the Clean River Fee, to support the payment of expenses related to the constructions of projects mandated by the consent orders entered into to eliminate combined sewer and sanitary sewer overflows. This charge is based on measured impervious surface areas. This equivalent residential unit, ERU, equals 2,000 square feet of impervious surface area, and each residential customer, both inside the city and outside the city, is billed 1 ERU per month. Commercial and industrial customers are charged based on the actual measured impervious area. The board recommends continuing the low-income discount for water and sanitary sewer commodities charges at 20%. Low-income customers are defined as being 150% of the federal poverty level and below, or qualifying for a state low-income program. The Department of Public Utilities is continuing its outreach efforts to identify customers that have not taken advantage of the low-income program. Lastly, the board recommends no increase in sewer and water capacity charges for 2017. The board feels that the rate adjustments are fair and equitable and are necessary to provide the funding to support the day-to-day operations of the division, as well as the continuing support a critical and sizable capital improvement program within the Department of Utilities. As always, the board will continue to work with the public utility staff to ensure that future rate increases are minimized to the extent possible. If you have additional questions, I'd be glad to answer them. If they're technical, I will defer them to the appropriate people.
I will hold on the questions till we have Mr. Lee's presentation, then we'll decide, technical or not, the answers to the questions. Thank you, Mr. Gladman. Thank you to the board, and appreciate the presentation.
Thank you, Chairman. My name is John Lee, Assistant Director for the Department of Public Utilities. I just wanted to thank you and members of City Council, the Mayor's Administration, the SWAB, Sewer Water Advisory Board, and the citizens of Columbus and the surrounding communities in support of these 2017 rate increases. Just to give you a little bit of background on what was been already said by the Director and the SWAB Chairman, as you know, our mission in the Department of Public Utilities is to provide superior public utility services in the City of Columbus and to surrounding communities. We are a very large utility. We serve over 1 million customers, have approximately 275,000 accounts. 3 water plants, 2 wastewater plants, an up-ground reservoir, so a large amount of infrastructure, miles of over 1,700 miles of storm sewer, 2,500 miles of sanitary sewer, and 3,500 miles of water line. And we accomplish all this with strong leadership from our director and support and dedication from our staff and the citizens of Columbus. As a note, providing clean drinking water and superior sanitary and storm services is paramount. That is our mission. And right now, as in the past few years, we are under regulatory requirements from the EPA. So throughout my presentation, a lot of that is the main driver behind our rates for 2017 and our past rates and our future rates as well. As you know, our utility is fee-supported only. We do not receive any income tax from the general fund to support our operations or retire our debt. And we also use bond financing and loan financing to support our long-term capital program. And overall, our operating budget is around $530 million. That includes just the utilities for sewer, water, and storm only. Tonight, I won't be talking about the Division of Power. That is another division. That division is not under the purview of the Sewer Water Advisory Board, okay? So as far as the presentation, and looking at 2017 on the screen, our proposed rates are 2.9%, as indicated by Chairman Gladman. And when you look at the individual utilities, we are proposing a rate increase of 3% for water, 3% for sewer, and 1% for storm. This is slightly lower than our rates for 2016, our current year. This year, we are around 3.31%. As noted, this will support the operating expenses and debt service. And the estimates for the bill impact, as I'll present here in the next slide, is based on 30 CCFs, okay? So that's about 7,500 gallons of consumption every month. So when we look at the breakdown of our proposed rates, our rates are in the city code, and ultimately the city council has responsibility for review and approval of those rates annually. Our rates are reviewed annually, and the structure of our rates are broken out by inside city residents and outside city residents. We also have in the code provisions for providing a discount program for low-income residents as well as seniors. And if you look with the 2017 rates, we are estimating that based on an average use of 30 CCFs per quarter, we're looking at about a $7.76 increase, or about $31 a year. When you really total that up, you're looking at about a $1,100 bill, and you kind of compare that to what we're paying in some of our other budget items. You look at your cell phone bill or your cable bill, sometimes between $120 to $150 a month. That equates to about $1,400 to $1,800 a year. Outside city residents are a little bit higher. In the code, it says and states that outside city residents for water will be charged around 1.3 to 1.5% higher than inside city residents. And low income, in the code, it allows for a 20% reduction on the commodity portion of a customer's bill. So they're going to see a little bit lower increase, around $26 a year. And I didn't note, but the outside residents are about $34 a year in increase. What I wanted to do next was kind of highlight where we've been over the past 15 years. And If you can see on the screen there, what I have presented is years 2002 to 2017. And back in 2004 to 2008, we had to quickly increase our rates, as noted, particularly on the sewer side, to comply with our EPA consent orders. And at that time, we were looking at sewer rates upwards of 18%. Water rates in the subsequent years were around 17% as well. So looking into the future, here we are in 2017 with our proposal. Looking into the future, we do not anticipate rates being that high. Our program has been refined, and we have a plan. Looking at the future, we're probably looking around no more than 4 to 5% increases annually for the coming years. Rates will continue to increase, again, largely driven by the EPA and regulatory requirements, both on the water and sewer side. So our goal ultimately is to balance that. When we understand that when it gets down to it, it impacts ratepayers and businesses' bottom line and their pocketbook each month, each quarter. So we are very sensitive to that. On the next slide, as noted by Chair Gladman, our proposed rates are approved by the Sewer Water Advisory Board. He mentioned no increase in capacity fees and no increase in extra strength charges. Our capacity fees, those are basically fees that are charged to tap into our system, okay? And we've been seeing an increase in those charges, growth in revenue from those as our community and surrounding communities grow. But based on some of our studies, cost of service studies, the recommendation was that our rates are pretty much in line with the industry standards, so we're not recommending any rate increases there. Our rate structure, though complex in the code, we are not proposing any major changes or overhauls to the actual rate structure itself. So what we would be doing is applying the 3% for water, 3% for sewer, and 1% for storm just across the board to the existing rates, okay? The rates would go into effect on January 1st. And just as a note, we get some questions on, well, how much revenue do we actually get from these rate increases? And on water with a 3%, we would receive about $4.3 million, on sewer, $5.1 million, and storm about $332,000. I think it's important to kind of frame some of the things that we, as Chair Gladman mentioned, some of the dialogue and modeling that we do and our goals with our rate setting. Obviously, we have to have, since we are an enterprise, we have to have revenue, ongoing revenue to support our operations. We are aware of, how a growing operating budget can impact rate increases, as well as our growing capital program, but we are very cognizant of that. And as the director mentioned, in 2017, we made strong efforts to control our budget with a 0% increase in 2017. With the capital improvements, obviously that is incorporated into our rate setting, and we model out several years, 10 years into the future, working with our sewer and water administrators to find out what types of projects are coming. And so what we have to do is kind of back into that and say, if we have large increases, a $200 million project, a $100 million project, what do we have to do now, okay, to build rates and build enough cash in order to service that debt? We know that it's coming. That's part of the planning process. And we also are required to maintain certain reserve levels. We have bond covenants that we are required to adhere to for those that purchase our bonds, and we have annual cash flow needs. So we have various targets that we strive to achieve, and so that's part of our modeling and our rate-setting process. Looking at consumption, that's obviously a global concern with, more efficient appliances and, toilets and washers and faucets, things of that nature. If you look nationally and you read some of the industry studies, A lot of communities that are not having growing population like us, unfortunately, are in a much worse situation with declining consumption. And so they're having to increase their rates significantly. And we also look at affordability. That's how, as I said, does this impact residents? When it gets down to it, they have to pay a bill, okay? And we manage our delinquency rates. We see, as we increase rates, how our delinquency rates. Are we seeing a higher people not being able to pay, deferring payments, things like that? We're also looking at how does our total debt to budget ratio and our debt service coverage ratios, what are those looking like? So a lot of technical financial modeling goes into that. I wanted to show you kind of where we stand locally, or I say regionally, with our bill in comparison to some of those other utilities in the state of Ohio, particularly Cincinnati and Cleveland. You can see there that our rates for 2016 are still under Cincinnati and Cleveland there. And you can see Cincinnati and Cleveland have a larger portion of their bill is focused on sanitary sewer. We are ahead of them as far as our compliance with the consent order. So we're about halfway with our consent order, our sanitary sewer consent order. So we're right in the middle, right in line with some of those other communities. And you look nationally, and a lot of studies show that water and sewer rates are increasing across many states and many communities and utilities about 2.5 times the consumer price index, the inflation index. And over a period of time, the average for water increases has been about 5.6% and about 6.1% for sewer. So we are under that national average. And again, in most cases, sewer is significantly higher. The reason behind those, the economic downturn that happened in 2008, that didn't help things with communities. Businesses left, water consumption dropped. We've had increases in commodity prices for chemicals and electricity throughout the years. Aging infrastructure. You get a lot of communities that are getting behind, and we have infrastructure in the ground that's been in there for 100 years. Things need to be replaced, and that requires ongoing capital investment. As noted on the affordability side, and as Chair Gladman mentioned, the low-income and senior discount program is very important to us and for the residents of the City of Columbus. Have some detail there on eligibility requirements. Basically, you have to have an income that's less than 150% of the poverty level, and you have to be currently enrolled in a low-income program and have a water and sewer account in your name or your spouse's name. We also have the senior discount program. That's a little bit different of a discount. That is actually a discount on the service charge or your billing charge. That is approximately about $23 a bill that would be waived. And again, certain proof of income requirements, things of that nature. And we also do a good job, I think, of doing outreach, to our community centers, our rec centers, social service centers. And in addition to these low income and senior discount programs on our website, residents can go there and they can see some literature on things they can do to reduce their bill. They can look at their meters, check their meters, okay? They can go and they can look to find leaks. They can do their own in-house leak detection, things like that. They can look for dripping faucets and toilets and washers. They can invest in rain barrels. We've got some information on that. And, do some mulching to avoid watering their lawn, which more watering means more water consumption, means a higher bill. Also they can adjust their water heater. So a lot of that's on there for them to look at. And we also have some information on auxiliary meters if you have a sprinkler system. So just a quick highlights there. As you can see, the trends on the low-income discount program. We have been maintaining pretty solid, steady levels over the past few years. Income growth, I think, is occurring here in Central Ohio, so that may be one of the reasons why it's somewhat flat. But the breakdown of that 6,000 total accounts is approximately 4,200 for single family and about 1,500 for multifamily, okay? In our senior discount, we see a bit more of a rise on our senior discount program where that could be attributable to perhaps a more of an aging population, population growth, more eligible seniors moving into Columbus. So that's a positive trend. And, you know, finally, my last slide here is just to kind of give you a frame of reference of some of the projects that the rate increases will help support through our debt service. As you know, as the director mentioned, we have major water plant improvement projects that are ongoing that are going to help with the taste and odor issues. We're going to be moving from chlorine gas treatment to more of a bleach-based type of process at one of our plants, and we're looking at new chemical feed processes such as ozone. And you look at all those, that totals about $343 million. So those have been ongoing for a couple of years. So like I said, our rates right now are structured to help support those past projects. On the sewer side, those past projects would be our Oars Tunnel project. That was about $364 million. And also, prior to that, we had major sewer treatment projects, okay? So totaling around $600 million. So we still have to pay for those today. And so our rates today are covering those costs from those prior years. On the water side, we also had the Upground Reservoir. I think you're familiar with that. That project, that was $115 million. Going into 17, Blueprint Columbus, that's going to be a major, 17 and in the future is a major project where we're going to be investing around $80 million to $100 million in some years annually for Blueprint. And as far as our water and sewer line rehab, we have a very aggressive program to change out aging infrastructure on the water lines, upwards of $30 million annually. So overall, looking at 17, our total annual capital program is about $364 million. The majority of that is for sewer, about $240 million, with water about $110 million, and storm about $14 million. So with that, Chairman Stinziano, I will close my presentation and answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Thank you, Mr. Gladman, for both the board's letter and position, and Mr. Lee for the thorough explanation of kind of how we got here and why we're here. Did have a couple questions out and about in the community that I'm hoping we could use the hearing to address. The first came up, obviously we had a bond package on the ballot last week, and one of the questions that was asked was, if this passes, will it impact rate increases? And why not? Why does the passage of one of those issues that was directed towards utilities not offset the current proposal for an increase?
Sure, I can answer that, sir. The bond issuance that was just approved by voters basically authorizes us the authority, the city auditor and the city administration, to issue bonds, and allows us to issue bonds at a lower interest rate. The bond issuances don't provide us the revenue, okay, so they're not going to really offset a rate increase. They allow us to continue to issue bonds to support our ongoing capital program, okay? So our rate increases of our overall rate increase of 2.9% is going to support those issuances through that bond, through our 2017 bond issuance. Does that answer your question? Okay.
It does. It's tough when you talk about bonds and
Right.
trying to explain that impact. I think the rates, or at least showing up on people's bills, impacts them a little bit quicker, and that's why it came up. Which then followed up with, of course, is this the lowest possible rate that can be achieved for our residents? What's being proposed, what the board looked at. I think Mr. Gladman gave a good explanation. I think you did as well in terms of competitiveness, but that question has consistently come up when people heard that there is potential for another rate increase.
Yes, based on our projections to cover our flat operating expenses for 17, our growing capital needs, these these really are our lowest possible rate increases. As you know, as I indicated, debt service is a fixed cost, and going lower on a rate now will only require us to make it up later. And so I think, the industry and studies have shown that it's better to propose rate increases that are somewhat in line with growth of income and inflationary growth. So that's part of our strategy, and our goal is to maintain some of those lower rate increases, but not zero rate increases to cover those costs.
I appreciate that explanation, and Mr. Gladman also reminded me, in preparation, I sat down with Mr. Dorian. He pulled out his binder and showed the history of the rate increases, and was very complimentary to that approach, that zero isn't appropriate, not going as high as we've seen in the past, and was very comfortable expressing support for the ordinances that are before us. So appreciate the explanation and reminding me that Mr. Dorian and I had a good conversation about the increase and how he thought it was the appropriate and reasonable approach. We talk a lot about consent decrees. What, in terms of trying to explain that with the public, but how it impacts our capital spending priorities, how that somewhat drives some of where priorities are, can you talk a little bit about the impact consent decrees have?
Sure.
Where both on bond issue, but on rate increases, priorities, how that has continued to play an important role for this department and what these rate adjustments impact?
Sure. We've been under our consent decree from the state EPA since around 2004. Okay, and so since then, we've been making significant investments and required additional rate increases, as I showed on the 15-year rate history. So we had an approach, the idea behind the consent orders on the sanitary side is that we eliminate combined sewer overflows and sanitary sewer overflows that contribute. What happens is rain comes down, it gets in our system, it overflows, we have to spill into the river, and it pollutes our water sources. And so we've been making significant improvements in our plants, and to date, we've spent over $1 billion. And so back in last year, we approached the EPA and asked if we could have a different approach, and that being that we wanted to target the source of this infiltration and inflow into our system. And so that was the beginning of the Blueprint program. And so we also said that we plan to achieve this faster. Our original consent order required that we complete it by 2045. We said, you know what, we can do it by 2035. And so what our planning right now and our modeling and our rate increases for this year and for future years are based on that schedule, okay? And so, we're looking around $250 million to $300 million in investment, next year in sanitary sewer and similar levels in the coming years. So, as I noted, even with those investments in the sanitary system and to comply with the consent orders, our modeling is showing we're going to be around 4.5% to maybe 5% at most in the coming years. So
that was a good segue, because the next question was, what could the public expect? So still 4 to 5% for the foreseeable future, or?
That is what we are projecting at this point. We are making efforts to reduce that as much as we can. As far as how do we do that, we analyze our operating budget. We look for efficiencies. We make sure that we can only do, with our capital program, we do what we think we can do with our current staff and our current resources. We don't over-bond, basically. So all of that goes into our projected future rate increases. And Hopefully that answers your question.
It does. And my last question, you did a great job, and I really appreciate in the presentation talking about the senior low-income program.
Sure.
We've heard some feedback on, I have a fixed budget, there's going to be a rate increase, how do I account for that? I did receive an email from a resident expressing the suggestion if there's a way to streamline and doing the insert, some of the outreach effort, and don't know if we're up to date in terms of best practice for participation to make it easy for low-income or senior residents to participate. And I don't know if it's questions as much as a comment of something maybe we could look into. I thought it was a fair point. I have not personally gone through the process, but interested always if we can streamline, make it easier for residents that would qualify.
Sure, we agree with the efforts to streamline any of our operations. And, with those programs, a lot of times what happens is people aren't familiar with it, there's paperwork involved. A lot of times they fill out an application, but they might not provide the backup documentation, such as evidence of their income, their current income levels, or, their account information, or proof of residence, things like that. So our process is such that we would receive the application, and typically, if everything is complete, we would be able to turn around an application in about 2 weeks. And so, in most cases, an adjustment would be made on the next billing period. So I would encourage those that to go onto our website and call the department if they have some concerns with our application process.
I appreciate everyone's presentation. I was not given any speaker slips, and I don't have any additional questions, so I will thank you again for taking all the time to be here, and those watching at home for participating in the hearing. Really appreciate the Department of Public Utilities, Chairman Gladman of the Sewer and Water Advisory Board, and the members of the staff for helping have this hearing, the presentations provided. The information is helpful as not only I go out, but I think other members from City Hall are talking about the rate increases and what's before us. As Mr. Lee mentioned, we always encourage those looking for information to visit the Department of Public Utilities website at www.columbus.gov/utilities or call 614-645-8276. My office is always open as well, 614-645-8084, or email at mstenziano@columbus.gov. As things currently stand, ordinances 2642, enacting new stormwater fees, 2643, which enacts new sanitary sewer service rates, and 2644, enacting new water rates, will appear on the Monday, November 21st agenda for consideration by council. That'll be the next step in the process. Seeing no other questions or comments, this hearing is adjourned. Thank you all.